I had the privilege of meeting Senator Tarr last summer on one of my history camps where Diana DeZoglio had an issue and Senator Tarr just stepped in and it worked out beautifully. And then of course we started talking back and forth. I met some of his staff and I really could tell that he would be the kind of speaker that I'd want to bring in. He's never come to my class before, so it's really, really exciting for me to see someone who's never come before. Rick's been here many times, but Senator Tarr hasn't. So he has been a great sport about getting all of these topics and really weaving through them. So I think it's going to be better now because you've done it already, so I think it'll be great. So Senator Tarr, we're going to start out with the icebreakers, and if it's okay, we're going to go back to your 8th grade experience.
Sure.
And share with us your favorite 8th grade class and then your least favorite going to your middle school or your junior high.
Sure, and by the way, I'm good at rolling with the punches, so we'll do whatever, wherever we go, we
It's
go.
the right class to pick.
And I hope no one has soup issues. I'm going to learn what a soup issue is, but I will tell you
soup as a lesson is going on and we're having a powerful learning moment.
Oh!
Not that anyone in this class would ever do that.
Oh! So it's easy to say that my least favorite class in the 8th grade was math. I struggled with math, and even
I'm going to stay.
after
I'm not
that,
moving.
I really struggled with it. I got through it, but it was probably my least favorite. And my most favorite was English, and that's because I was able to read and write, and I liked writing. I liked reading and learning about things and the world around us. And I also, somewhere in the middle, liked science a lot. And so science lost out to English in terms of what was #1, but if I had to pick a close #2, it would be anything involving the sciences, because I enjoy that too, and still do. So math, worst on the list, still important. Don't want to give anyone the wrong impression.
Again, we don't want to say that too loudly, Senator Tarr.
English.
I tried to help him last time.
English the best, and science a close second.
Great, thank you very, very much. Okay, so we're going to move on down the icebreakers, and we're going to go to the next question. And the next question I thought was really cool because it really offered your diverse taste in music. First concert that you remember experiencing, and you mentioned a couple, which is cool.
So when we were talking about this earlier, I was saying that, like you, my first concert was probably one in school. It was one in school. So I think that Mr. McGravy wasn't talking about that. So I tried to think about what maybe the first concert in the sense of maybe a rock concert would be.
Yeah.
And I was mentioning that for me, it was a Billy Joel concert. And I'm a big fan of Billy Joel because he is a very strong supporter of the commercial fishing industry and the men and women who are in it. And also, Billy Joel has a connection with Gloucester, and it's not uncommon to see him walking around in the city of Gloucester, and he's very friendly when he's there. And so that was my first, but very closely in time to that would have been my first opera, and it was actually an operetta. And it was a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. And I mentioned earlier the reason that I like Gilbert and Sullivan is they are in English, so they're a little easier for me to understand. And they're very creative and very witty because Gilbert and Sullivan like to parody the things that they were seeing in their lives. And then so they're a fun kind of operetta. And if you haven't been exposed to that, I would encourage you to go and see it.
And it's funny, when you said opera, I got a case of the giggles in the last class because I had kind of a funny experience with the opera. So when I was in college, we don't need to talk about it too much, but at the time I was dating a girl who was really into the opera. So her and her family brought me to the opera, and I didn't know that it was, I'm 19 years old, it was a 4-hour opera. And I fell asleep.
Oh, no.
And snored during it, and needless to say, that relationship was over from that moment on. I'm going to give opera another shot based on you talking about it, and hopefully
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you remember, was it in English or did it?
It was in Italian.
And it had subtitles?
I don't even remember. It was such a blur to me, Senator Tarr. I just remember that the girlfriend was gone pretty soon after that. That's what I remember because I was so young. But all right, so we're going to move on to give us a shout out for a restaurant or a kind of food that you enjoy.
Okay, so I love Mexican food. I absolutely could eat it for all 3 meals of the day, every day. I am as comfortable with a breakfast burrito as I am with an enchilada in the evening and everything in between. So lots of great Mexican restaurants around, some here in North Andover, in fact. But Mexican food is definitely, for me, the top of the list. Lots of others, but
cool. That's a great answer.
Top of the list.
Coolest place that you went on vacation, and again, your answer is kind of cool. I like the answer.
So I actually love the place that we live in every day, and so some of my best experiences have actually been here. And I was mentioning earlier that I have a boat, and being out on the boat has given me all kinds of amazing experiences, like being surrounded by a pod of dolphins, or seeing a whale up very close, or seeing the really magical reflected colors on rock formations on the coast at sunset. And so, without having to go anywhere, I've had some wonderful experiences that I enjoy very, very much. If I had to pick a place that was farther away that I've been to, it would be Quebec City, and inside the walled city, the old part of the city, because it has a fascinating history of the English and the French and how it developed into the place that it is now. And just a wonderful feel to it and a wonderful history to it. So locally, you can't beat just getting out on the water here, and to travel, for me, it's been Quebec City.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so as we move on down, this does not have to be a celebrity or an athlete or anything, but who's been like the most impressive person you've met in your line of work? And it's kind of cool if we've never heard of this person, because it kind of exposes us to someone different.
So I get to meet a lot of amazing people. In fact, it's one of the best things about being a senator, is getting to talk about things with people who are just amazing at what they do and how they impact our lives. I had mentioned that one of them, for me, is a researcher at Children's Hospital named Dr. Leonard Zahn, who is researching stem cell research and genetics and how they influence us. And he is doing some amazing work. And the way that I met him was that in the legislature a number of years ago, we were going to take up bills around the rules for stem cell research. And he was in an article, I believe it was in the Boston Globe, and I said to my staff after I read that article, I want to meet him. And I want to meet him tomorrow. And I got to meet him and got to learn a lot from him. And he's one of those people that you don't see in the newspaper every day, but he's making a huge difference. And there are a lot of people that I get to talk to that are like that, but he's one that stands out in particular.
I was going to ask the last question. What hospital or university?
Boston Children's.
Boston Children's. You mentioned that. Okay.
They have a research wing.
Gotcha.
And he is part of it. And George Daly was also there with him, another very notable individual. Excellent. And I'm not sure that George is still there, but I know that Leonard
Great.
is.
Great. So we mentioned that one of your friends, Mr. Andrew Mailer, who used to be the town manager here and then state comptroller, and he's leaving to go to Merrimack College to be the vice president there. So Mr. Mailer, as you all know, and everyone met him, he's got this very bravado about him. He's just a very confident person, which I really, really like. And he created this catchphrase over the fall. He's like talking about government and a job, and he's like, civics, it's good stuff, which I thought was a really cool slogan. And I'm not going to steal this slogan because maybe he trademarked it or something, I don't know. But finish this statement. Civics is important and should be taught in the schools because ...
It's the infrastructure that protects our rights and lets us pursue our dreams.
So that could be on a t-shirt too, so thank you very much. All right, so now I really love this question because we have debates in this class quite a bit. We debated the voting age. We're debating, aspects of civics. And, sometimes in class you will see a trend of the majority of kids are feeling some way. But I'm really happy that I have students, and there are some students in this class, who aren't afraid to go against the grain and are in the minority. I just love that. To me, when I was in school, I would always look and see how people voted, and I would go with them. I just didn't have that confidence that some of my students have. So, based on those students' experiences, I have a question for you, because when I was typing, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're having the Senate minority leader in. Perfect opportunity. So, touch any of these, Senator Tarr. What does it mean to be the minority leader in the Senate? Obviously, you're a Republican. What does it feel like to be in the minority political party in Massachusetts that has a majority of Democrats challenges. How do you overcome obstacles and get things done? Love to hear your impressions about that.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think it's important to say how lucky we are to be in Massachusetts. Because in Massachusetts at the State House, there is a respectful collaboration between the parties. Now, we don't always agree. We clearly don't always agree. But we work together and we respect each other and we have a very civil discourse between us. So I'm very lucky to be the minority leader in a state like this one. What it means to be the minority leader is you try to make sure that there's another perspective represented in the discussions. And, you know, our founding fathers never intended us to go into the Senate chamber and all say or think the same thing. In fact, quite the opposite. They intended us to walk into the Senate chamber and offer our different perspectives, and from the integration of those, come up with the best possible public policy. So I have to bring those ideas to the table. And as we were talking about in the earlier class, there are some people that sometimes treat the role of minority leader as being an obstructionist, you know, just to try to get in the way of the majority, to trip them up and to delay them and to obstruct what they want to do. I don't view it that way at all. I don't view, and I know again that there are many who do. I think that you send me to Beacon Hill to be able to get results. And I start from the perspective that everybody who's on Beacon Hill with me is well-intended. We might have serious differences about how we're going to advance our good intentions, but we all start from a good place. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it's just a matter of how you're going to find ways to work together. And so, you know, I have right now in my Senate Republican caucus, there are 40 senators, and there are 4 Republicans.
Wow.
Up until recently, there were 6. 2 of them actually, I had mentioned earlier, retired. In a way, they didn't retire. One went to work for Bridgewater State College, and the other one ran and became mayor of the city of Westfield. So now we're down to 4 people. But, you know, we could look at it as a mathematical situation, but I never have. Right? It doesn't matter to me. I'd sure love to have more members. But what's important is not the number of members. And that's the thing about being the minority leader. I don't walk into the State House on any day, and say, I'm going to win just because of my party. And I can say I have 36 members and we're going to outvote the other side on everything that we do. I don't have that luxury. And, you know, it'd be nice to have more members. But here's the thing. In the State House, what's most important is the power of an idea and the power of knowledge. And so I have to go in every day knowing if I'm going to make a difference, I have to have information, I have to know the rules, and I have to be able to build coalitions. And if I do those things, then I'm able to advance our ideas along with everybody else who wants to advance their ideas. Now that isn't to say that we always agree every single day, and that isn't the case. But we come to the table, and we come to the table to try to make that difference. And I mentioned that when I became minority leader, I mentioned this earlier, I said there were a couple things that we would commit to as a minority party. One, that we would never fail to try to find common ground. That we wouldn't come to the State House every day just to look to be different for the sake of being different. Number 2, that we would always offer our honest ideas on what we thought about something. And number 3, if we were going to disagree, we would do it in the most respectful way that we could find at the time. And I've committed to doing that every time I've been reelected as minority leader, because those things are important. To me, it's important to say, here's what I stand for, here's what I believe, I respect what you stand for and what you believe, let's see how we can find a way to work together. And if not, let's go to the floor and have a respectful discussion, and whatever happens, happens, but it's the result of a good process.
So I didn't ask this in the last class, but so your Republican peers voted you in as Senate Minority Leader,
Correct.
Is that correct?
So this is an interesting part of the whole process is, so yes, my caucus elects me.
Okay.
And then I appoint them to various leadership positions in the Senate, just as the Senate President does. And a really interesting wrinkle to all of this is that every year, or every 2 years, when we're sworn in, I actually run for Senate President. And so if you want to talk about a humbling experience, that vote falls along party lines.
Wow.
But folks nominate me, and we give nominating speeches, and we have a discussion. And every year, I pretty much know what the result's going to be.
Okay, all right.
It's part of the process, and it's an important part of the process.
Okay. So here, if you don't mind, I'm gonna flip the program a little bit because I have to get these kids to their related arts classes.
Sure.
We don't have the luxury of going into academics, so I'm gonna flip it.
Sure.
And obviously, period 81 was, we're a little bit timid on this. I think I'm gonna probably maybe get a different result in here, possibly based on what I've seen previously. But I would like you to pose a real-world problem to the kids that you faced in your office. Now, it could be the same problem that you did for period 81, which I thought was a really cool problem, or you could bring something up. And then students, Senator Tarr would like you to express to him, like, how would you go about it if you were on his staff? How would you help him solve his problem? So it's a little more engaging, a little more interactive in this part of the program, but I'd love Senator Tarr to provide an opportunity for you to show him, what you're capable of.
All right, so I think we'll use the same one.
I think so. It was really good.
It's a practical situation. So in the town of Wilmington, or neighboring communities, we have had a situation that has been deeply, deeply concerning, and it involves a train station. So Wilmington has 2 train stations, and one of them is known as the North Wilmington train station. And it happens to be right next to Route 62. And the difficulty with the train station is that it is somewhat of an antiquated facility, and when the train stops, it stops in the middle of Route 62. And the reason it has to do that is to be able to accommodate folks with physical challenges so that it can get to the right spot so that they can get on board in alignment with the platform that exists. The difficulty with that is that about 2 years ago, and I could be a little bit off on the time, there was a situation where someone was actually having a heart attack, and the train was across the road. And the first responders were delayed in their ability to get to that individual. And we never know why things happen and how they come out, but in that particular incident, that person passed away. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a similar situation where there was someone who was ill, the train was across the road, and the first responders were delayed in getting to the response. So the difficulty is that no one wants to see the police and fire personnel not be able to get to an emergency, but nobody wants to have North Wilmington not have a train station anymore. And everyone who wants the train station wants to make sure that it can accommodate people with physical challenges. And so some of the discussion has been around, well, maybe we just won't have the train stop. It only happens, by the way, when it's going one way, not the other. Maybe we just won't have it stop anymore when it's going that way. Or maybe we will just close the train station altogether. Or maybe we'll try to find out another way to deal with this, but it's clearly not a good thing if people from the police and fire department can't get to an emergency, but it's clearly not a good thing if people lose train service either. And it's also not a good thing if people with physical challenges can't get on the train. So it's one of those classic public policy challenges about what do you do to be able to make sure that everybody gets the best out of that situation. And so, what do you think? Yeah.
Just as a clarification,
Yeah.
the train stops in the middle of the road?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you move the platform or create a new platform where the people get on so that the train has to stop farther down so that people can get on?
That's a possibility.
Is the road that the train's going across, is it elevated off the ground or is it directly on the ground?
No, it's pretty much on the ground. It's pretty much a grade crossing so that everything's all level. Yeah.
Could you maybe just upgrade the train, have it move the platform down, and maybe make it so that there's maybe another route for the first responders to go that wouldn't cross the train when it's stopped? There's an alternate route for them to go around.
Possibility.
Very good, you guys.
Yeah.
Maybe you could reconstruct the road to go over the train, like a bridge.
Okay?
Before anyone else thinks this is a suggestion, I just want to put yourself into the shoes of the people on both sides of the issue. So, if you're a commuter and you commute into Boston from this area, could someone tell me how would you feel if Senator Tarr says we're closing it down and your stop is no longer going to be there? How does that impact those people?
That could be someone's only route to work.
So how does that impact them?
Well, they probably can't provide for their family.
So they'd have to leave the job or have to come up with other arrangements?
Yeah.
Good. Sir?
I mean, I wouldn't like be too mad because there are like multiple train stations around, but there's Andover, there's another one in Timon.
Thank you for being optimistic.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go to the other side of the issue, and I don't mind sharing something, personal with you all. So my mom, she's 84 years old. She's in congestive heart failure all the time. She can never get out of it just because of her age. So luckily my mom lives down the street near the Lawrence General, and she's had to go by ambulance quite a bit, unfortunately. But so if I lived in this area, or my mom lived in that area, how might I feel if that was moved or not moved? What if it was allowed to stay there? Yes.
Like, you would probably be like really concerned for your mom because like you don't want to have a situation.
I don't want her to be a statistic. I don't want her to be a statistic. So I think it's healthy to look at both sides of the issue, and it was cool that Senator Tarr allowed us to do that. So before Senator Tarr gets into the results, does anyone else want to offer any kind of insight into this problem? You guys did a really good job.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yes.
Could
That's awesome.
you move the train station so it's like further like down, so there could be another route for the train to travel instead of going on the road?
Possibility. I will tell you the difficulty with some of those is the cost to do those things, but certainly a possibility. Another one back here?
Could you refigure the actual train so that where people get off is not in the way?
Could you like let me in another spot of the road? Like you know where the train stops, you know where it lines up across 62. Could you make a path so that the first responders could move around the back of the train, or like have it be where that can access?
Okay. Yeah.
Could you like elevate the train tracks so the train can go like over the road, the bridge?
Possibility. Cost is an issue there, but possibility. Yeah. Okay.
One more.
Oh, here we go. Yeah,
Oh,
go
this
ahead.
is fantastic.
Maybe you could build another fire station like on the other side, or just another way for people to get more access to it.
Okay. All right, so let me tell you that almost everything you all described is being discussed.
That's awesome.
All of it. And so this is a classic example. First of all, I think it was really important that we all tried to put ourselves in the shoes of sort of both sides of this. That nobody wants to lose access to a train station, and nobody wants to have first responders not be able to get to them. And it's also a classic example of the solution is probably not going to be one thing or the other, but a combination. And so here's what's happening. The legislative delegation, and there are 3 of us in Wilmington, got together with the folks in town, with the police department, the fire department, the MBTA, Keolis that runs the train. And what we've come up with is a little bit of a lot of what was said here. So we are going to build a platform that is a hybrid, that is a shorter platform, move it on the site so that people with physical challenges can still get on the train, but the train can now stop without getting into the road and be able to accommodate those folks. This is a platform that doesn't exist. It's being created out of parts of a dismantled bridge so that we can get what we need to get done without having to spend a lot of money, which nobody has for this. And it is actually going to make sure that A, the train stops short of the road, that it stops in a different location, but yet it can still accommodate people with physical challenges because the height needs to match the train. And so this new platform is going to be able to do that. So That was an incredible discussion.
And I'm just saying, Senator Tarr, I do know these people, so if you're ever looking for part-time help or any workers at your office, I can hook you up with these brilliant minds right here. They did a really, really good job. All right, so now you
Let
continue.
me just say that we generally wait until high school, but when folks are in high school, we do have interns. We have lots of interns.
Great.
And we've had lots from North Andover over the years, and we always welcome them. So you got to wait a little longer, but we would be delighted.
Don't forget your 8th grade teacher when you get to high school, and I'll be more than happy to pass on contact information to anyone that would be interested. All right, great. Okay, so now we're going to go back to something that we kind of flipped, how a bill becomes a law. We've been learning quite a bit in this class about how a bill becomes a law. And we've learned at the federal and at the state level, and we've also learned that the experience is very different in DC and in Beacon Hill. The one thing is, we not only talk about the actual voting majority, we looked at vetoes and we looked at overrides, and statistically the president has won federally 96% of the time, only 4% from Washington to Trump. President Trump has there been a successful override. But when we met with Representative Vargas and Representative Minicucci last week, they were like, well, we just did an override of the veto last week. So I'm going to pose just a couple questions, and you can deal with these any way you want. Share your experiences in the successful passage of the Civic Action Bill. What bills have you been the most proud of? What is your opinion of the proposed bill to lower the voting age, which this group of kids have an amazing perspective on, and some experience about overriding the veto of, Governor Baker, Governor Patrick, all the other governors that you've worked with in your career, and I think you flipped it in the last class, which worked really well. So just tackle anything that you'd like.
Okay, so let me start with vetoes.
Cool.
And it's important to understand that there really, from my perspective for this conversation, there's really two kinds of vetoes. There's vetoes on spending items, and there's vetoes on policy items, right? And so when we deal with the state budget and other spending documents, the governor has a line item veto, which means that he can veto something without vetoing the whole bill. He can send us back a part of it that he disagrees with. And when it comes to spending matters, it is routine for the legislature to override the governor. Doesn't happen all of the time, but it does happen a significant part of the time. And the reason for that is because the House or the Senate has written the budget, and has written a budget that it thinks is balanced and fiscally responsible and responds to the priorities of the people that we all represent. The governor may have a different idea about that. And so the governor oftentimes will veto spending items to say, look, I have to keep the budget in balance. And in order to do that, I have to reduce these things or eliminate these things from the budget. And the legislature's response oftentimes is, we sent you a balanced budget, so we think that it is balanced, and those things that we put in it to help our constituents don't need to be removed. And so regardless of the party of the governor, a lot of the time on spending items, both sides override the governor. So it is not uncommon for Republicans to override a Republican governor or Democrats to override a Democratic governor when it comes to the budget. On other matters, on policy items, it's a little bit less frequent for members of the same party to vote to override the governor. But what also happens on a lot of policy items, and this is a theme that I think should run through your thinking about how government works, is oftentimes it's not either this or that. Oftentimes on policy matters, the governor will send us back an alternative. And sometimes the legislature will amend that alternative and send it back to the governor. And so that's one of the things that we talked about in the last class that I think is really important, is that the process is never really done. Things can change up until the very last minute. They can even change not only after the governor signs them into law, they can change in the next legislative session where somebody says, hey, we don't like what we did with that law, let's try to change it again. So at every step, at a committee hearing, certainly legislative floor debate, between the branches when bills are considered, because both branches have to act on every bill, when the governor gets a bill, it can always change. It is never over until it becomes law, and even then, it's not completely over.
Great. So do you want to talk about the Civics Action
Sure,
Bill? And,
yeah.
and you were in the trenches for that, and you voted for it, obviously. Love to hear what you think of that, and then if you don't mind, we'll take a pause, and I'm just going to allow you to see the pulse of the class with the voting bill.
Sure.
And then you can chime in on that if that's
Sure.
okay.
So with regards to the Civics Bill, it is a great example of what I was just talking about, in that you could read about the Civics Bill, that it got filed, it went to this committee, and then usually when bills go to a subject matter committee, they go to either the Rules Committee or the Ways and Means Committee afterwards, so there's two committees, and then the debate on the floor in each branch and so forth. The interesting thing about the Civics Bill, and I had been filing bills for years to strengthen civics education in Massachusetts, but the interesting thing about the Civics Bill was all the discussion that happened as we were putting it together. So what I was mentioning earlier is that from the Senate perspective, we all sat quite frequently at a big conference table, everybody that had an interest in the Civics Bill, and we talked about what the bill should look like. And as I had mentioned before, we started with the sort of the four corners of the piece of paper saying, this is going to be a civics bill, but what do we want in it? And we worked at it and we worked at it so that we could at some point say, look, here's the bill we all want. And not everybody agreed. And what I was mentioning again earlier is that some of the things we didn't agree on were how you were going to do your project-based learning, how that part of the bill was going to work. Were you going to do it as an entire class? Were you going to do it as an individual? Were you going to do it in small groups? How often were you going to do it? What grades were you going to do it in? There was a lot of that discussion. And so before the bill even started to move in the process, there was a whole lot of discussion, hours and hours of work and research. And eventually there were some things that we all couldn't agree on. But we all agreed that it was important to move the bill. So we put out a version that reflected our best compromise and said, look, as the process continues, because we can still evolve the bill as we go, we will continue to try to evolve the bill and work out those details that we can't all agree on. And so what I had said before, and again, I hate to keep saying that, but I want to make sure that people know we had this discussion earlier, but what is important is that there is always that discussion going on. And in this case, it happened a lot before the bill was filed. And sometimes you read in the newspaper, or people get the perspective that the only time we're doing things on legislation is when we're in the chamber having a debate. And honestly, that is the least amount of time and energy we spend is in the floor debate. It is probably 10% of what we do. To get to that floor debate is the 90%. Of the research and the committee hearings and talking to people and receiving testimony and reading emails that people send to us, or conventional mail, or whatever it is. By the time you get to the floor, so much has happened. It's not to say that floor debate isn't important, but it certainly isn't the majority of what we do when it comes to a bill. And so that was what happened with the Civics Bill, and it went through a lot. It actually went to a conference committee, and a conference committee is when the House and the Senate passed two different versions of a bill, and neither one wants to concede to the other this version. And so we appoint 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate, and those 6 people are charged with working out the final version of the bill. So it's kind of interesting to think about that after all of I just described happens, only 6 people write the final version of the bill. And they have a lot of power in the process. And the reason they do is because when they come up with that final compromise version, by the way, on which at least 2 members of each side have to agree, so you have to have 2 House members and 2 Senate members, when that bill comes back, it is generally unamendable. So when it comes back from those 6 people, you have a vote. And the vote is, do I accept that compromise or do I not accept that compromise? So it's a really powerful thing to go through a conference committee process. And that, in fact, is what happened with the Civics Bill.
So, you feel free to abstain, but in a moment I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand 1 of 3 times for the voting bill. So, sorry for 1 second. Hello. No, we're in period 86 right now. All right, sorry about that. So how many people here are for the bill to lower the voting age? Can I see a show of hands? Who is against? And who is undecided at this time? Okay, great. So I kind of put Senator Tarr on the spot on this, and he you know, he's definitely going to share with us his opinion, which is great. Please, it was great in the last class to hear, you know, your thinking on this.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your opinion if that's okay.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you sharing your opinion with me.
Yes.
And I'm also going to tell you that on this, I have some thoughts. I'm still open-minded about it because we have a long way to go. And I also understand the natural inclination to say, I want to be able to vote. That's endemic, I think, to being human. You say, I want that thing. I want it to be given to me. The reason that I have some concerns about it comes from a lot of the research that has been presented to us in other contexts. So last year we did a criminal justice reform bill. And we have considered this same issue in other contexts about when does someone become an adult? When is their brain formed to the degree that it can be capable of making important decisions? And an example of that is the recent change to raise the age for smoking to 21. When a lot of evidence was presented, and we were told by a lot of people that to make that kind of a decision, you need more brain development, and therefore we should raise it so that people don't make decisions that might be disadvantageous to their health. In the criminal justice context, we were told that folks shouldn't be guilty of an adult crime until they're much, much older than age 18 because their brain hasn't fully developed, and they shouldn't be held accountable for the decisions that they've made with a brain that isn't fully developed. So my concern is that all of that runs contrary to saying that a very important decision that not only affects the individual but affects all of us will be made against the weight of that research that says that the brain needs to be more fully developed to make those kind of serious decisions. Now, certainly there are arguments on both sides, and I'm receptive to them, and we haven't been to the point of making any decisions on the bill yet, but that's my concern with the bill.
Thank you so much, and I think it's great that you heard both Representative Vargas last week and now Senator Tarr. It's very healthy to listen to both sides of the issue. Both of these individuals are thinking very much into the issue, and they really guide you through their thinking process. And it's great that we're able to respect one another's opinions, and I thank you for sharing your opinion on that very much.
And if I could just add,
Please.
Representative Vargas and I are friends, and we both agree, and this is an example of what I was talking about earlier, we both agree on the basic goal, which is we need to get more people involved in voting and in our democracy, and more people engaged in our democracy. And we have those conversations from time to time. So we agree on the basic premise, but what we're trying to work on is what's the best way to get
How to
there.
get there, how to get there. Okay, so you were talking about the options for the Civic Action Project and working on your bill that became a law. This group of students, as I mentioned in the last class, are piloting the new civics curriculum put out by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and they did not sign up to be in this pilot. It's just French-German team. This is what they got, and they're all rolling it really, really well. Don't really know what the Civics Action Project is going to look like for this group of kids, because clearly we're really going through the curriculum. I will promise you we will have some product. It's probably not going to be like it's going to be in 5 years from now, but these kids will kind of be the trailblazers for it. So as they're picking issues, as they're picking areas that their project may involve, what's advice you can give them on being non-politicians, civilians, trying to get their message out and trying to make connections in the world of where we live?
So first of all, we all have a role to play in our democracy and in the way things work. Some of us spend more time at it because that's our official role, but everybody has a role. And I think that's important to remember. When you're picking a topic, I would say try to pick something that actually can have an impact. And think about what that impact could be, so that you're doing something that is important academically, but also you really believe in. that you want to see something come from. That's number one. Number two, I would say keep an open mind. Go where the facts and the information lead you. You never know where it's going to take you. And you will be amazed at what people are willing to tell you about and help you learn about if you ask them questions. I will tell you, as a senator, it is amazing to me how much people want to teach us if we ask them. And I would say that's true for you as well. If you ask people, hey, I really want to know about this, can you tell me about this? You will be amazed how much that you will learn and how open they will be with you, as long as you're respectful and responsive listeners and you have interaction with them. You will be amazed. And the other thing, and the reason that I used the train example, and you all were phenomenal in the way that you responded to that, is that don't fall into the trap of assuming that something is always either this or this. Because in public policy, oftentimes the solution is a combination, or finding common ground, or a hybrid. It's not always either this or this. And sometimes when we start out with a project or we start to do research, we start by saying, well, it's got to be this. Well, if you do that, then you foreclose all of the other options and everything that you might learn. So always please remember that you got to be open-minded and you got to find the best information and then go from there. You may find out that it was this, but what if it was this? And you said, I'm not going to look at this. You'll be selling yourself short.
So, Senator Tarr, first of all, period 86, I think you give him a round. I think this was a great. This was really, really great. We really enjoyed this a lot, and hopefully you are. This is the first of many future civic action talks that you're going to do with 8B, because I'd love to have you come back next year, and because of these kids, I think that everything, we've started something pretty cool here. So I did let Senator Tarr know that I do recognize students as Civic Agents of the Month. They're rewarded both with an award and with the speaker and with a breakfast, thanks to the wonderful people at Dunkin' Donuts. So again, just to embarrass all of you, being the dad that I am, please, you don't have to stand. Raise your hand if you are a Civic Agent of the Month. So it's quite a few people here. So the first person I want to recognize, and I'm not going to walk around because I don't want to get in the way of the camera. So this first person I'd like to recognize, this is someone who's upbeat all the time. She's got a great civic attitude, and I'm also going to add civic humor, because I can always guarantee for some reason she laughs and she reacts to things in kind of a cool way, and it's always good to have someone like that in class to keep it light. So Alex or Alexander Clifford, I'd like to recognize you. Congratulations, congratulations. You can go over to Senator Tarr, I'd appreciate that. All right, and the next person that I'd like to recognize is for his continued civic contributions. He's upbeat, he's positive, he always contributes to class on a regular basis, and I'd like to congratulate and recognize Thomas. I'd like to recognize you. So congratulations, nice job. Congratulations. I'm gonna get you to get a picture, I'm sorry. All right, I'm gonna get a quick picture of the speaker. Excuse me. All right. Here we go. Ready, everybody?
There we go.
Great. I have a meeting here, but if you'd like to introduce yourself to Senator Tarr, come on by. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Gabby.
John, nice to meet you.